So I wanted to start by, actually, what I really wanted to start with was a poem from Paramahansa Yogananda. Now, this is an old favorite. So if you'd like to close your eyes for a moment and just meditate on these words a little bit. This is called The Noble New. Sing songs that none have sung. Think thoughts that ne'er in brain have rung. Walk in paths that none have trod. Weep tears as none have shed for God. Give peace to all to whom none other gave. Claim him your own, who's everywhere disclaimed. Love all with love that none have felt. And brave the battle of life with strength unchained. So thank you all again for being here. And I'm going to start with a little introduction of myself and Polestar, what Polestar is. Many of you know our story, so I'll try not to bore you to tears with too long a recap. But it is a good moment to look back as we're looking forward to such a significant project for us. So as many of you know, my wife Ann and I started Polestar about 20 years ago. And it's an educational nonprofit. And the core idea, the thesis, the main theme of Polestar is really the power of community, the power of education within a community. And so the idea being that if you have an environment that supports your physical, mental, spiritual development, that is the most powerful way you can help people, students of all ages, children in particular, to evolve, to grow. And really that is our core value, is that we seek continuous evolution, continuous expansion, continuous growth. And so that's really in a nutshell. And I'll talk a little bit more about the, further, nuances of our vision, but in a nutshell, that's it. It's really that the community, and in our case, an intentional community, is what creates that environment. Our inspiration springs from, as many of you also know, Paramahansa Yogananda. For those of you who aren't familiar, he came to America in 1920. And he was one of the first yoga masters to come to America, and I think the very first who actually spent most of his life and made his home in the West. So he was kind of the first herald of the East-West connection. He brought Eastern culture and spirituality, and in a very sort of dynamic exchange of ideas and culture and spirituality. And it's really his inspiration that has been the guiding light for Polestar. There's two parts of his teachings. Well, I should first say that essentially what he brought was the teachings of Raja Yoga, which essentially is a path of meditation and service. So it's sort of in very broad, succinct concepts. If you aren't familiar with his teachings, they could be described that way. Now, he also had a couple of other very important aspects to his teachings. For example, when he first started doing his service in the world, he started with education of youth. And he called his educational movement and ideas how to live education. And this is really a theme for Polestar as well. We're interested not just in academics or any particular aspect other than the whole being, the physical, mental, spiritual development. So that's just a really important theme for us and part of what Polestar's values are. And then the second one is also very important, which is the he spoke very passionately about the need for intentional communities. Back then, he called them world brotherhood colonies or world communities. And the idea was to gather together those of like mind and to live more simply and try to get the things that are most important, the things you value the most, into your life more frequently, and not to be carried away by the tide of your environment, but rather to choose your environment in a way that supported your ideals. And so these are two very important themes in the life of Polestar. So as I was mentioning, well, a little bit of history about Ann and I, incredibly, back in our late teens and early 20s, we actually were interested in this idea of community. In fact, went in with family and friends on some, we bought in the Appalachian Hills of Kentucky. We bought 40 acres with family and friends for $1,250 back then. That's what 40 acres would cost you. I always say, I think it's worth about the same amount now, but probably it's worth more now. But the idea was to the same thing. We intuitively had this sense of needing the tribe, wanting the environment around us that really supported how we would live together. And so that was our first attempt at that. And it was kind of epic. A cabin still exists there that we built. It would have been like 40 years ago now or something, a long, long time ago. And that property is still used by members of my family, which I'm pretty happy about. So from there, we landed in the late 70s at Ananda Village in Northern California. And this is one of the great events of our life, really. It was just an explosion of involvement in everything we love about life, which is spirituality, meditation, for me, building and sports and community building, and just was a fabulous environment for us. One of the seed inspirations that came out of that experience was raising our two kids in that environment. They were, it was so satisfying to see very young children have a safe environment where they're surrounded by people who know them and love them and care for them. And this really struck me as the ideal environment to raise young people, and really students of all ages, but it was especially meaningful for me, being a parent of young children, seeing that dynamic. So we started Polestar in 2000, the year 2000, with the idea of taking all that inspiration, everything we've learned, in community building. Everything okay? Yeah. Oh, we got
you're good. You're good.
Technical
Keep going,
difficulties.
Keep going. It's all right.
Ann's fixing something. Hold on one second. Can I keep going? You keep
talking.
Okay, thanks. So when we started Polestar, we were in Northern California for about the first 5 years, but then we were just kind of following the trail, and we started with youth programs and building community however we could. Polestar, we have a lot of interest in sacred music, kirtans, youth camps. We did all that kind of, community building things. We rented a big house in Santa Rosa, California, and lived there with friends and family, and that was very fun. And then doors started open on the big island of Hawaii. So it's kind of strange. I'd never been to Hawaii, and then in the course of 18 months, went there 3 times, none of which were sort of out of my own initiative. I didn't have the idea of going to Hawaii, but it just sort of unfolded. One thing after another, and we ended up buying 20 acres of this beautiful farm. Well, it wasn't a farm when we bought it, it was a jungle. But our last 15 years have been here on the Big Island and building Polestar. And looks like somebody's got a little video of it up there too. If you look at Bernadette, so this is kind of an infamous part of our story. But we were here about 11 years, and we had a great run here. In our heyday, we had 25, 30 people living here normally. When we had big programs, you could get up to 40 or 50. We had sacred music festivals and all kinds of programs, youth programs, elder programs, yoga programs, meditation programs, you name it. And so we had a really wonderful, wonderful run here, doing the same things we always do. And but there was one difficulty we really couldn't solve with that we had in this location, and that was the fact that it was so remote. They say Hawaii is the most remote place on earth because it's surrounded by oceans, thousands of miles of ocean in all directions. And while we had a lot of people who would come and visit us for a week or two or a month or whatever, to really make it a lifestyle that was sustainable was difficult. Also having to do with the local economy was not, real prosperous here. So there were a lot of challenges that way. We never in a million years imagined we would ever leave this place, honestly. I mean, we built a wonderful retreat and community here, and we're really, fulfilling a lot of the mission of Polestar, other than this one fact that it was very remote. So enter the Madame Pele, who, if you've never met her, we know her well now. Well, when we first came to the islands, we were big fans. We hike out there all the time, and I know many of you on the screen have hiked out there with us. So it's really kind of an amazing force of nature. And but Pele came and right in our backyard. The first eruption was about a little over a quarter mile from our house. And we went out there at 5 in the morning before the officials arrived so we could get nice and close and get a good view. And then it went on from there. Actually, Vina, I think you've got a few pictures you can put up just to show you a little bit of the idea. So if you have them, go ahead and scroll through them. So one thing led to another, and okay, that was supposed to be the last one, but that's good. That's good enough. Leave it there. So if you look at this picture closely, you look across the river of lava there, and you see a bright light in the middle of the hill. And that's where we are sitting right now, actually, very near to that light. And that little hill that surrounds it is Polestar Gardens. And the glow you see up to the right of that hill is fissure 8, and it was sort of the famous fissure. There were many, many fissures, but that one really had the knockout punch. It poured out an incredible volume of lava, and just flowed for weeks and weeks and weeks, I think months actually on end, and covered, I forget how many acres, but huge swaths of land, and dumped into the ocean, wiped out whole subdivisions. In the end, it never really touched our land, which is kind of remarkable because it went right along the northern border. I was just out there hiking there yesterday, and it never really actually touched our land. However, due to the river being there for so long and the air quality and everything, many of the plants died. Something you don't think about a lot in Puna, where we live, is fire clearing. But because it's raining a lot of the time, so it's not really a thing to worry too much about. But in this case, all the plants were killed. There was a dry spell, and a fire came in and burned our temple and our main house, which is about a 6,000 square foot house, really the best 2 buildings of this development here. Vina, go ahead, switch to some other pictures just to show them. that particular day, hiking to the edge of the river like that, we had been evacuated for about 2 months. And we had no easy way to check on our property. So it was fun hiking to the edge here, which was a little sketchy, as we say, and looking across and seeing that the house was still there. So that was pretty cool. Hadn't seen it in a while. But go ahead, Vina, if you've got some others, put them up. Suffice it to say, this was the message Ann and I got from this great event, is that really our time on the Big Island was done. And that we still wanted to be part of a community. We still wanted to build a community. We still wanted to express all the values that we share, but that this was no longer the place to do it. So, all right, Vina, you can pull that down if you're seeing me. We can go back now. Thank you. So that brings us to really what this meeting is about, which is what's next. And so what Ann and I did, we took about a year. We hiked over the hot, but it congealed enough to hike over lava to fix up the property here. So we did kind of a big salvage operation here. And we had a roof that blew off. We had a big pile of mess. If you can imagine a 2-story building, 5,000 square feet, and all the rubble that that would entail, hauling that to the dump. So we did a major cleanup and sort of a salvage operation. We flew a ride-on-top mower out here on a helicopter, tethered to a helicopter, and started mowing the lawn again. So that was quite amazing. And now if you come here, which I hope will be more and more possible as the year goes on, Polestar is beautiful again. It's green. It's avocado season. We're drowning in avocados, Rollinia, bananas. So it's really back to being a beautiful place again. But nevertheless, Ann and I both felt, thank God we agree on these things, that our time here was done. We didn't want to be this remote. We wanted to be closer to our many friends and family on the mainland, but we still wanted to do this community piece. So we went traveling and we just were completely open-minded about where we might end up. We looked at places in California, in Oregon, in Southern California, in Arizona. And we went to Fort Collins. So, in fact, we ran into our friends Dennis and Bailey, who are the owners of 9 acres there that they farmed for many years. I think the better part of 4 decades they farmed there. It's fun because you call somebody and they, like we're working with a lot of professionals in the Fort Collins area, and you say, oh, you know Happy Heart Farm? Oh yeah, I bought produce there. So they're kind of famous in Fort Collins, and they have this beautiful acreage there, and sort of the city of Fort Collins has grown up around them. And anyway, we met up with them. We traveled out with them. It was great to. Yeah, good. Oh, and Ann tells me they are on the call. I was expecting they were. We'll hear more from them next week, because I hope to have them share a lot more about the farm and their perspective on this whole thing. But having known them for a long time, and they had actually visited Polestar years before, which was very cool. And they're basically sitting on this property that has a really perfect opportunity for us to create a community. And there's many, many different facets to why we think it's perfect for us. I hear there's winter in Colorado, so maybe that's the one thing we found so far that isn't perfect. But I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, so I will probably adjust. But anyway, the beautiful thing about connecting with them was they had this vision for community with which they called an agrihood. And the concept is you keep a chunk of the farm and you bring in housing and you grow your own food. In fact, of the very few things that Yogananda wrote about intentional community, growing your own food was one of them. He mentions it. And probably most people on this call have felt the call and the value in that exercise of gardening and eating from your own garden, etc. And so that is a real important piece of the vision. And then we want to express all the things we love about community. When we build this place, it will have a temple, of course, a sacred space. People can meditate, pray, or however they express their spirituality. We will have a dining hall, so people can share meals. We'll have a park with pickleball courts and volleyball courts and any other kind of play equipment people want. There'll be an important feature of the whole enterprise is walkability. So if you haven't heard that term before, you will hear more and more about it. And in everyone who's trying to do a conscious community now understands this basic fact is when we let the automobile dictate how we develop our land, we lost some very valuable things. And there's a way in which people being on foot a lot in a locale connects them like being in an automobile cannot. You know, you run into somebody in an automobile, you're afraid for your life. You run into somebody on foot, you learn about their kids and what's happening in their life, and you connect. And this very simple but basic thing is actually quite important. Those of you who know about this thing, there's been a whole movement in city planning, of course, towards communities that are more livable, quote unquote. And this is one of the themes of them is keep it compact, keep it walkable. If you can walk to the things, the main parts of your life, the quality of your life goes way up. You know, what if you can walk to go meditate or do yoga? What if you can walk to the park to go exercise? What if you can walk to where you work? What if the kids can walk to school? It just changes a complete different energy than everybody jumping in their cars and driving everywhere. Not to mention all the other benefits, the lighter environmental footprint, the incredible amount of energy and space we lend to automobiles. And I don't want to go too farther in this, but just to say, with the advent of drivable vehicles, self-driving vehicles, it will become much less important, I think, to own a vehicle. And so anyway, hopefully there's big changes coming there. But a couple other parts of the vision, we definitely want to have a school. This is really important. We have connections with all kinds of teachers and educators in the Ananda school tradition, the Education for Life tradition. We have connections in the Montessori tradition. And a lot of how things unfold is community. In community, it depends on who shows up and exactly what they want to do and what they have the energy for. And so this is, people want to have the answers for a lot of things we don't have answers for yet, because really it does depend on who shows up, my personal value for youth education is that, as I mentioned before, the community is the most important part. If you have mentors, if you have friends of all ages, that is just huge in helping you find your way to yourself and being nurtured in that process of self-discovery. So we definitely want to have elder housing as part of our vision. And at the rate most people I know are aging, the sooner the better, myself included. So the idea is that you can live in a community, and actually we've learned some very good things because we have contacts in people who are in this kind of work. And Vina, who introduced us today, actually has been involved in this kind of work as well. One of the things we've learned is that if you keep it compact, in other words, elders live close together within a community context, the point at which they actually need a formal assisted living situation is way, is put off for a long time. Because you have a community, because you have other elders around you, you have this sort of economy of people around you who care and want to help. You need a little help, they'll help you out. Or if you have a day that the nurse comes one day and sees everybody, or whatever it is. So that was one important thing we learned, is that if you build it well, the assisted living becomes less and less important for much of your life. But as we know, the end is a train wreck as far as I can tell. And you might get to the point where you really need more professional care, and we want to have that on site. In fact, that's one of our first projects we want to get going, is to have an assisted living home where people could actually, they wouldn't have to move out of their community. At least, they could move into a room in one of these homes that has professional help and maintain their relationships, maintain the familiarity of their environment. It's just an obvious better solution to the way it's most often done these days. And so that's a key part of our vision. There's also a very cool thing you've probably seen where people will mix the preschool with the elder housing, so you make a conscious intention to join. That's a perfect example of the power of community. You have those kind of resources on one campus. You can use them in creative ways for everyone's benefit. To back up for a minute on the dining hall, many co-housing people will often say one of the things they love about co-housing is the fact that with a group of people, you can cook and clean up like once a month or once every other month, depending on the size of the group. And every evening come home and have a home cooked meal prepared for you, and so that's just and it's also a very social, and bonding kind of environment, sharing food together. Okay, a few more things about the vision. It is zoned in what they call this mixed use zoning. And so, as I've often said, their zoning laws kind of read like our mission statement. The things that we want to do to create community, they really want us to do, which is really refreshing for how many decades we've been at odds with our government regulations in this particular case. And it's a big part of why we're purchasing this property. That is a green light. All the things many of the things that we care about most are written right into the code, the building code. So you can have what we envision as kind of a neighborhood center. So it probably doesn't support like a full-on grocery store, say, but you might have a buying club. You probably have a yoga studio. You might have a coffee shop. You could have offices, live work situations where people could live upstairs and work downstairs. You might have a little bit of retail, but maybe, specialty retail. So it's really what they call a neighborhood center. So there's a lot of things you can do without getting in your car that's right on campus and part of your home. I should mention that a big grocery store is only a half a mile away from this campus. And so you could easily take your bike, or they have public transportation that comes right down that Elizabeth Street. So you can walk about a half a block and get on a bus and go pretty much anywhere. So the prospect of not owning a vehicle is actually quite good for someone who would want to adopt this lifestyle. What else about the vision I would like to share? Couple other features of the land that are maybe worth mentioning. And then we're going to go to questions. Looks like we've got them coming in. Oh, thank you, Vina. Oh, that's nice. Good idea. That helps. And I don't know if you can shrink that down a little bit so it's not fitting on my screen. It doesn't shrink. Okay, no worries. Let's start, with that area there. And if you look at the bottom right-hand side of that picture, you will see Dennis and Bailey's house. And thank you. Yeah. So that's probably where they are right now. And then as you come up, you can see, and I should say, first of all, that this is more of an artist rendering. You could stop there, Vina, that's great. We haven't really done this much planning yet. The planning is, it's going along very well. And actually, this has been a very helpful sort of exercise and iteration and draft. And it has a lot of the features. But we are very much in process with this. And there's certain things about it that we know we will do differently that have come clear. But the basic idea and the concepts are there. You have a community center. You have a farm and a meditation temple and food growing and a place to have recreation and elder housing and shared housing, affordable housing. I didn't mention that. That's a big part of what we value. We want a diverse community. We want young people involved in our community. We really want to work hard to get affordable housing. So we have in this particular zoning area, we can do all kinds of different housing. We can do townhouses, we can do single family dwellings, we can do duplexes, we can do fourplexes, eightplexes, up to 12. We can have live work on one floor and apartments above. So we have many opportunities to do affordable housing, and you know, many, if not most, of the young people I know have a really hard time in this kind of the day and age we're in, with the housing boom going on almost everywhere, entering the housing market. So we really want to make it more accessible for people. That big green area in the middle is actually some version of that will be required for drainage to fulfill the city's water detention and flooding requirements. So it's actually a real mixed blessing, because it's a big chunk of open space and it'll be dry most of the year. And so it actually provides some nice open space and place to walk and you know, so it's actually a plus. And so you don't want to take this map very literally, but there are some, you know, the basic brush strokes are in there. All the different elements are there. I'm probably forgetting one. Let's see if I can. Oh, okay, here's an important thing I did want to say. Polestar here on the Big Island was really set up as kind of an ashram. You know, the nonprofit owned the land. People came and lived here. It was a very sort of scripted program. We had daily meditation 3 times a day. We had a rigorous, you know, sort of scheduled life, and it's what we all chose, and it was wonderful. It's really what created the power of the experience for many of us. That said, this undertaking is very different in this regard. I've been using the word intentional neighborhood, and so it's designed to be enjoyed and appreciated by a much wider group of people who might never sign up for 1-month program at Polestar the way it is now, but who resonate with the values and find that the nonprofit and its mission are an asset to the neighborhood. So I really like this idea of the intentional neighborhood. I mean, people who want to put an intention into creating a community that has many different parts, that has people owning their own homes, and you know, being able to sell their own homes or give it to their kids or whatever. And the idea is to attract people who resonate with the ideals and include them. You know, this is not meant to be exclusive, but inclusive of those who would appreciate living in a place like this. And so it's a little bit, my belief is that the way that it'll evolve is through the process of building it, we will endow the nonprofit and empower the nonprofit to fulfill its mission within the common areas. So in the temple and in the dining hall and in the, you know, we will that will be our field for holding the space in the way we want to hold it. And then, but beyond that, you kind of vote with your feet. You know, you have your own home, you have your own, if it's a single family dwelling, if it's you know, a condo or whatever, there'll be a homeowners association agreements. And you know, governance is a huge topic in all this, of course. Any of you have been involved in community. Our ideal in all this is cooperation. And what we found is that if people resonate with similar ideals, they have much greater potential to cooperate. And so in a nutshell, this is a quite a different undertaking than what we've done to date, but one I think that has the potential to reach a lot more people and make it accessible, this kind of lifestyle, a lot more accessible. So you kind of have the right to pick your point of you know, evolution and your point of revolution around what Polestar is doing and participate to the extent that you find is appropriate for you. And if it's anything we've learned about communities, it's that it's like a river. You know, the water is never the same. You know, it just keeps flowing by. And so it's also true with community. We're all passing through, in case you haven't noticed. But my belief is, and really, and one of the great values of this enterprise, I think, is that communities communicate culture. And so we can cultivate this culture of spirituality, of involvement, of service, of connection, and we can live that way, and we can teach our kids to live that way. And really, there's no reason, once you've established it, it couldn't last for a very, very long time and continue well into the future. So, okay, I've talked long enough, way too long. I apologize, but I would love to hear some questions, and yeah, let it fly. Okay, Vina.
Thank you, Michael. One question we have is, what are the next steps?
I just saw one from Diana. That's a good question. She said, it looks like you're using a co-housing model, and that is true. But the question was, are the common areas jointly owned by the people who live there? And that is a really good question. I don't have a perfect answer for yet. The idea is that the common areas are accessible to all the people who live there, but that the nonprofit is allowed to inhabit and more or less own it. So I don't know how that's expressed legally yet, but it is something we're working on. But the idea is that the common areas are accessible to everyone, but the nonprofit, importantly, is empowered to inhabit them. So, okay, who's next?
So
Yeah.
No, but when we get home.
in the chats.
Okay.
But you haven't said we don't have the deal yet.
Right. Okay. All right.
So sorry.
That's all right. No. So I'm the only one who's getting the chats.
But Vina has some other questions.
All right. No, that's all right. I'll take these. So Anne wanted me to mention in her practical way, which is very important, a lot of this stuff is in process. The legal financial model, we're making great progress on it. We've got great legal help and financial help, and we've got a history of doing projects like this. So we know how we want it to work. We don't know how that expresses specifically yet in dollars and cents yet, and in the legal structures. But in an enterprise like this, you have multiple legal entities, and they're designed for minimizing taxes and protecting everyone from liability. And we're basically in that process. It's going very well. It's becoming clearer and clearer. And we'll have much more to say about that soon. But yeah, it is important to note that we don't really have the offer yet or the deal. I can tell you that the developer who worked on this project and didn't move forward with it about 4 years ago saw, hello, Tom Thiel. I thought that was you. The developer who worked on it before us had a model that he was working from, and the lots cost between 80,000 and 160,000 each, just to give you some kind of idea of what we're talking about here. Of course, as you get into multifamily, things can get more economical and et cetera. And we're talking to various partners on the affordable housing side of things. So it's all going really well. Amazing number of connections in the Fort Collins area, which we're really excited about. Okay, I see one right here. Water sources from Para. Thank you for asking. As part of this purchase, we are purchasing 20 acre feet for agriculture. And which is to say, we've got a really good allotment of water to grow. I'm sure Dennis and Bailey will tell us more about this next week. But the short answer is we have city water for potable water, and we have, we're part of the, I think it's called Pleasant Valley Water Share, which is a significant purchase and expensive, but required to do any serious farming here. So that is part of this whole thing. Okay, here's another one. Any idea when people can actually move in? Good question. Well, we hope to move in this summer. But there won't be anything there. We'll be moving in nearby, we hope. But just to give you an idea of the complexity of this project, because it's a little bit like going to Mars. I think, you know, when you look at the city puts out a little graphic to show you all the steps to get your entitlements approved, and it's impressive. But basically, the idea is we have 12 to 18 months of planning. And at the end of that, you win your entitlements. In other words, you do a public presentation, and all the city officials are there and who you've been working with all this time, and they approve your project according to the plan and the laws, and that will take 12 to 18 months. After that, you have entitlements. You can put in your infrastructure. So that's what we call here tentative approval. In other words, they say yes.
What are entitlements?
Okay, entitlements are, right now the zoning allows us to build there, but you couldn't go pull a permit yet because there's an intermediate step, and that intermediate step is the planning process that brings you to the edge of approval, and they call it tentative approval, which means it says, yes, you can do all these things you planned as long as you, 1, put in the drainage, 2, put in the roads, put in the sewer, put in the water. So all that takes another 12 to 18 months. So we're probably you know, a good two to 3 years to actually building projects in Fort Collins. In the meanwhile, we will be there. There's quite a few of us looking at landing there this summer if we possibly can. Let the party begin. We'll start doing all things we do and working on the land and get the farm going and probably growing plants and landscape material for our, upcoming development. And there's a lot we can do on the land, but we can't start building yet. Let's see, another question. What are you thinking for growing your own food and a CSA? Okay, and I'll save that for next week. It's a very good question. And Dennis and Bailey had a very successful CSA there for many years. And now that there's sort of a captive audience there, I mean, there'll be, that was somebody else's question. How many people do you see living there? And that is a very good question. It probably in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 people. We're still planning it, so we don't know, but there's probably 80 to 120 units, depending on how many go multifamily and depending on how many are affordable. The affordable housing, one way you get affordable housing is you do micro units. So we're looking at that. But just to give you an idea, it's probably somewhere in that ballpark. It might be that the farming model is different. Again, it depends on the community. It depends on what makes sense. I think a lot of people will want to be involved in the farm and garden. So we want to facilitate that. And what economic model makes the most sense, I'm really not sure yet. Okay, where does sadhana fit in at all in the communal areas? That's a good question. Sadhana, for those you don't know, is our spiritual practice. I expect there will be, like we've always done at Polestar, weekly kirtan, a daily and probably multi-times a day practice. Lots of different people volunteer to lead it. And so it's always available. If you want to go in and meditate in a group, you have that option. That is our spiritual tradition. We meditate a lot in a nutshell. And morning, noon, and evening is normal, but the temple will always be open. We do all we love to celebrate all the traditional holidays as well. We're big Christmas celebrators, and a lot of our own personal spiritual holidays will be celebrated as well that have to do with Yogananda's life. Question about affordable housing. Oh, there's a good one. How about visitors? Thank you, Patricia. I'm glad you're here, wherever you are. We definitely want to have guest facilities there, and we're in the desirable zone there at Fort Collins where you can have visitors. You can do Airbnb, so probably there'll be an Airbnb aspect to the community where people can come and stay with somebody, or stay in facilities we will have. Interesting thing about Fort Collins, and I think Vina is going to send out fun facts about Fort Collins. It is a very charming, progressive, fun little town, but it's a university town, college town, and the average age in Fort Collins, believe it or not, is 30 years old. So it makes me feel old, but I'm glad of it. And we definitely want to accommodate visitors and would plan on proceeding with a lot of our events. Once we sort of get out of all this strange time we're in, the global weirding, as they're calling it now. Oh, here's one. Will you be doing adventures to the Big Island? I did want to mention that briefly, and we are coming up on our hour, I'll bet. So we'll try to move towards wrapping it up. But it's been a lot of soul searching here to figure out what's to happen here. We love our land here. It's our history and our roots, and it's a beautiful beautiful place, and we brought it back to life. I mean, it's just wonderful being here again. So we had sort of an in-house group, part of our Ohana, that looked like they wanted to maybe pick it up and run with it. And that is not completely out of the question at this point, although not looking likely. We did sort of announce last week that the property was for sale, and that was partially to, you know, stir the pot a little bit to see if anybody stands up and says, don't do that. So we did get a couple of inquiries on that, but mostly, you know, this is not a casual thing to run a property like this, and we and neither will Fort Collins be, and so we kind of feel like to do things well, we have to focus, and so at this point we are headed towards putting it on the market. That's kind of where we stand.
It's delayed.
But so we'll start by answering some of the questions we didn't cover last week, and then we'll do a little bit of a recap, and then next week will be about the farm and garden, and that should be fun because Dennis and Bailey can tell us more about their history and you know, all the things that they've learned in their building of community in Fort Collins these past many decades. And then we'll go on from there. We want to do a session on elder housing. We've got some professionals in that field who will come and talk to us about it. We have some really wonderful architects and planners involved in this project who have a lot of experience with urban planning and co-housing and you know, conscious design, all kinds of interesting things. So we'll make a meeting for that. And we'll sort of go on from there and just follow the trail, but it will give us a chance to connect with each other and visit a little bit. And I apologize for being the only one who said anything in this hour, which is, but appreciate everyone's attention and for coming today. And I would like to close, since I have my ukulele here. This is that poem I read at the beginning, The Noble New by Yogananda. And a friend of mine put music to the word. So, The Noble New.
Peace to Thanks, Michael. I miss seeing you.
Good to see all of you. Thanks so much for coming. Join us next week. We'll send out a link. And if you have other questions or you want to call me, feel free to call me. If you need more information, happy to talk to you more about it.